After the 1932 German federal election, the Nazi Party had a plurality, but not a majority. And the communists were the second strongest party right behind them. Adolf Hitler was sworn in as chancellor, and he's head of the coalition government on the 30th of January, 1933. As chancellor, Hitler wanted the president, which was Paul von Hindenburg, to dissolve the Reichstag. So he wanted to get rid of the legislature and call for a new parliamentary election. The date set for the special election was March 5th. Hitler's goal was to acquire a majority, not just a plurality. And he wanted to secure his position by getting rid of any communist opposition. The way the government was set up then, the president could still remove the chancellor, but Hitler's goal was to abolish the democracy in kind of a legal fashion by passing what was called the Enabling Act. Now, the Enabling Act was a special law that gave the chancellor power to pass all laws by executive order without the involvement of the legislature. Seems a little familiar. The Reichstag is the German legislative capital. It's the parliament at the time. And on Monday, February 27th, 1933, just shortly after Hitler was elected, the Reichstag was set on fire. The man arrested for this act is Marinus van der Loop, who was a Dutch communist living in Germany. The court decided that van der Loop acted alone. He said that he acted alone. He was known as a manic depressive. He was known as an arsonist who attempted several other fires even earlier in that week. So it's kind of cut and dry. The Nazis blamed the communists, said he didn't act alone, but it was actually a communist plot to destroy the legislature. Now here's where the intrigue comes. On the opposite side, we have a man named Hans Martin Lennings, who is a member of the SA. He claims that on the night of the fire, he and several other officers drove van der Loop from the infirmary to the Reichstag building and dropped him off. And when they dropped him off, they could already smell fire and they could see smoke billowing out of the building. So he said that the SA actually played a role in this fire. He said that he was forced to stay on the scene with his patriarchs and sign a document that denied any knowledge of the incident. And he claimed that the other witnesses were executed. He was warned about it, and he fled to Czechoslovakia. That's why he was alive to later give his testimony. Now also, as we get a little more serious, at the Nuremberg trials, General Franz Holder testified in an affidavit that Hermann Goering boasted that he was responsible for the fire, that he had actually set the fire. We also had the fire chief at the time, Walter Gent, who said that he was prohibited from actually putting the fire out, actually doing what he's supposed to do to stop it. And he was dismissed from his position when he found and uncovered evidence that the Nazis were involved. And eventually he was in prison, and while in prison, he strangled himself, I guess, or he was strangled and killed in prison. Sounds a little bit, maybe he knew the Clintons, I'm not sure. So posthumously, in 2008, Germany actually exonerated van der Loop. He was pardoned, I guess, or exonerated, but that doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't involved. It just means that the Nazis were so corrupt that Germany basically cleared out all the convictions during their administration. I gave you a little background on the fire because most people don't know about it, but I'm not really interested in it. What I am interested in, and what I'm very worried about, is how that fire was used by the German government to seize total control and to squash any opposition. The very next day, the Reichstag Fire decree was passed. And since they said that the communists were plotting insurrection against the government, That decree suspended most civil liberties in Germany, which were never recovered until after the war. They suspended habeas corpus. They suspended the freedom of expression. They suspended the freedom of the press. They suspended the right of free association and public assembly, and the secrecy of the post and the telephone. So they didn't have internet at the time, but it's pretty much exactly what we saw happen here. The decree was used by the Nazis to ban any publication that they consider not friendly to the Nazi cause. And the Nazi Party fabricated fake news to send the German population into a panic and to isolate the communists as enemies of the state. Thousands of the communists were arrested and imprisoned, including those who were serving in the legislature at the time. With those politicians removed, their seats had to be filled. Who do you think filled the new seats? Obviously, the National Socialists. Now, am I calling the Democrats Nazis? Not at all. They are socialists, but they are about as far from nationalist as you can get. But Arnold compared the protesters on January 6th to Nazis, and Democrat leaders in the press has been doing the same ever since. And I showed you that January 6th has absolutely no resemblance whatsoever to Kristallnacht, but it eerily resembles what we saw in the Reichstag Fire. So I'm going to go over the events of January 6th, like really lay it out, because what you heard in the press is not accurate to what really happened. And I ask that you double check me, because regardless of your politics, you have to say what narrative really matches. I'm not worried about differences in policy. That's okay. We can have that debate. But we have to agree that if we have any hope whatsoever of moving forward, the basis has to be truth.